Hi, I'm Mr. C, the teacher, and this is my classroom. Over the years, I've created hundreds of lessons in every subject area. That's tons of topics to teach. So grab your tools for school and join in with us. Or sit back and just watch. And let's go on a learning journey together. Because you're watching Lessons from the Classroom. Well, let's take a look at what the topic for today's episode is going to be about. There are lots of different types of clocks around the world. This one here behind me has the numbers not just from 1 through 12, but also the numbers 13 through 24. There's also behind me a digital clock, and of course, we've got our play clock, which doesn't really tell time, but yeah, it looks good.
Worksheet lessons.
Here we have a worksheet on telling time, and it says, telling time to the hour. Write the correct time under each clock. Well, what we want to do is we want to look at where the shorthand or hour hand is pointing to. This one is pointing to the 1. So right here in the front, we write 1. Whenever the hand is pointing up to the 12, it's actually telling us it's 0, 0 minutes. So we would say this clock is showing 1 o'clock. Here's how you read it on what we call an analog clock with the hands, and here's how you read it with a digital clock. So let's take a look. This one is pointing up to the 12, so we know the minutes are going to be 0, 0. This one's pointing up to the 12. The minutes are going to be 0, 0. This one, minute hand is pointing to the 12, so the minutes are 0, 0. This one, the minute hand is pointing up to the 12. We know it's 0, 0. And this one, we can see it's pointing up to the 12. We know the minutes are 0, 0. Whenever the hand is pointing to the 12, the minutes are 0. What we need to do is look at the shorthand and see what number it's pointing to. This one's pointing to 3. That means this is 3 o'clock. This one's pointing to 6. That means this one is 6 o'clock. This one is pointing to 11. That means this is 11 o'clock. This one is pointing to what number? It's pointing to the 7. That means it is 7 o'clock. What hand is this number pointing to? The hour hand is pointing to the 9, and that means this clock says it's 9 o'clock. And that's how we tell time to the hour. You know, I love being surrounded by great books, because one of my favorite things to do is to read stories. So let's make some time right now and read a storybook. This is story time. "8 o'clock" by Jill Creighton. Mr. Wolf moved into the empty house beside the chicken coop. "Right next door to dinner," he chuckled, rubbing his paws together. He put on his speckled tie, his feather-patterned waistcoat, his egg brooch, and his chicken watch, and then he went to introduce himself to the hens. "How do you do?" he said sweetly, leaning over the fence. "How are you today?" "We're fine," said the chickens. "Just clucky, thank you very much." And they all giggled the way chickens do. "Would you care to join me for dinner?" said Mr. Wolf. "This evening." "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" 1 o'clock. "How kind," said the chickens. Mr. Wolf grinned. "I'll call for you at 8, he said. The chickens looked at his beautiful watch. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" 1 o'clock, said Mr. Wolf. He smiled craftily to himself, thinking what a very big stew he would be able to make. Mr. Wolf went home and cleaned his kitchen in readiness for his chicken dinner. "Those chickens will never guess my plan," he snickered. "They're such pea brains." He washed dishes and dried dishes. He swept the floor and wiped the counters. His chores took him 1 hour. The chickens passed by his window carrying coils of rope. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they called. Mr. Wolf stuck his head out the window. 2 o'clock. He smiled politely, showing his long white teeth and wondering about the rope. Mr. Wolf pulled his head back in and opened the kitchen cupboard to drag out his largest cauldron. It was dirty and a spider had laid eggs in it. He scrubbed and cleaned and polished the cauldron till it glowed, then rolled it over to the fireplace and lifted it on to an iron hook. That took him 1 hour. The chickens passed by his window, wheeling wooden boards in a wheelbarrow. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they giggled. 3 o'clock, he answered. "Those chickens certainly are busy," he murmured, absent-mindedly rubbing his belly. Mr. Wolf began carrying buckets of water from the stream to fill up the big cauldron. He made 14 trips back and forth. All that carrying took him 1 hour. On his last trip up from the stream, Mr. Wolf met the chickens carrying bags of nails, hammers, and 2 big padlocks. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they asked. 4 o'clock, he answered, licking his lips. "I've never seen such busy chickens," he thought. The chickens winked and smiled and waved as they passed by. Mr. Wolf went out into the forest with a sack to gather wood for his fire. He dragged it home and laid the dry sticks neatly under the cauldron, all ready to light. Gathering the wood took him 1 hour. There was a lot of noise, hammering, banging, squawking, coming from next door. Mr. Wolf went out and peeked over the fence to see what was going on. The chickens were building a big crate. "Chickens building?" Mr. Wolf chuckled to himself. How ridiculous. 3 chickens stood in the yard near the fence. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they asked, smiling sweetly. 5 o'clock, he answered, drooling down his furry chin. Mr. Wolf hurried home and cut up a big stack of vegetables to go in the chicken stew. Carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, and some green pepper. Dumplings would go nicely, he said to himself, and he mixed up a batch of thick batter and set the bowl aside with a cloth over it. The chopping and mixing took him 1 hour. Then Mr. Wolf peeked out his door. The chickens were all inside the henhouse, gathered round the telephone. One chicken poked her head out. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" she called. 6 o'clock, he answered, staring at her fat belly. She slammed the door. "Rude," he murmured, "but pleasingly plump." Mr. Wolf decided to set the table. First he ironed his best tablecloth and smoothed it over the table. He laid out his shiniest silver, his chicken platter, and a bright red napkin to go around his neck. In the center of the table he placed a large silver dish to catch the bones and a glass full of peppermint-flavored toothpicks. On the kitchen counter he set his sharp knives, his ladles, his spoons, and a chopping board, all in a row. All this took him 1 hour. The chickens were pecking in the yard, but they lifted their heads and fluttered their wingtips at Mr. Wolf when he came out. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they cackled. 7 o'clock, he murmured, in a quiet, crafty voice. Soon it would be dark. Mr. Wolf went indoors humming to himself. He covered the cauldron and lit the fire to heat the water. Next door he heard a truck backing up, so he peeked out the window. The chickens were struggling to lift the big crate they had built into the truck. 3 pigs were helping them. Eggs going out, Mr. Wolf thought, and flipped the curtains shut. He went to hunt for some clean cloth sacks and a pillowcase to save the feathers. Then Mr. Wolf took off his speckled tie, his feather-patterned waistcoat, and his egg brooch, and he laid his chicken watch gently on the top of the dresser. 1 hour had crept by. His stomach was rumbling as he tiptoed down the front steps. His claws were itching as he sneaked toward the chicken coop and slithered through the gate. His teeth were glistening as he pushed open the door of the hen house with his chilly black nose. The chickens cackled in front of their mirrors and fluffed up their feathers. Each of them turned one bright eye toward the door. "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" they lisped daintily. "Dinner time!" roared Mr. Wolf, and he leaped inside. There was a screeching and a growling, a thumping and a bumping, a scuffing and a yowling, and a squawking. The henhouse door burst open. Out came Mr. Wolf, followed by all the chickens. He bounced down the path, trussed up tighter than a holiday turkey, tied in 100 knots. His toes stuck out one end, his nose out the other, and his tail flopped along like an old feather duster. The chickens twirled him over to the truck. The 3 pigs rolled him up the ramp. Everyone jostled him into the crate, slammed it shut, and snapped on the 2 big padlocks. Before Mr. Wolf knew what had happened, the pigs jumped into the truck, started up the engine, and roared away down the road. The chickens fell to the ground, giggling hilariously. At last, with tears running down their beaks, they got up and went next door. All laid out for them was a lovely feast: chopped carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, and some green pepper. There was even batter for dumplings.
Hey, what did the digital clock say to the grandfather clock?
Oh, I don't know. What did the digital clock say to the grandfather clock?
Hey, Sonny, why are you talking to me? What?
Look, Grandpa, no hands. Wait a second. I can't help it that I don't have any hands.
All right, it's time in our episode for this segment that I like to call the Did You Know Fun Facts.
Did you know?
Atomic clocks, which use the vibration of atoms to measure time, are incredibly accurate. They can maintain accuracy to within 1 second every 33 million years. The tallest clock tower in the world can be found in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. It's known as the Abraj al-Bait clock tower. Its clock face has a diameter of 43 meters. That's huge. But then the tower is really tall, so it's got to be big. Otherwise, it'd be this little tiny clock. You need like binoculars to be able to see it if it was small. Makes sense that it's really big. The first wristwatch was designed for Countess Koskowitz of Hungary by Swiss watchmaker Patek Philippe in the year 1868. Well, that's 100 years before I was born. And wristwatches, they gained popularity amongst men during World War I, when they were found to be a lot more practical than pocket watches. All right, well, it looks like I've got plenty of art supplies and tools on hand, so I guess it's time to do some quick art creations.
Quick art creations. More worksheet lessons.
Okay, so here we have another worksheet, and this one is on telling time to the hour. And in this case, they've given us the time. It's going to be 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 9 o'clock. What they want us to do is draw the hands on each clock to show the correct time. So we can see the clocks are missing their hands. Now remember, we can use something like green to show the shorter hand pointing to the hour. In this case, it's going to be pointing up to 12. So I'm going to make a short green hand pointing to the 12. And we know that the minutes are going to be 00, 0. To show 00, we're going to draw the longer red hand straight up to the 12. So both hands are pointing straight up. Here we've got 2 o'clock. So I want to make my shorter hand, I'm going to do it in green, pointing towards the 2. There we go. That's my 2 o'clock. And I want to make my bigger hand that points to 00. We know 00 means 12, straight up, 0 minutes. That's where the clock starts. Right up there. 2 o'clock. What time do they want us to do here? 9. So where are we going to draw the short green hand pointing to? It's going to point to the 9. This one shows us how many minutes? 00. Where are we going to draw the longer red hand pointing to? Straight up to the 12. All right, let's look at the bottom clocks. Here's our hour, shorthand. Here's our minutes, longhand. So this one's going to have the shorthand pointing down to the 6, and it's going to have the longhand pointing straight up to the 12. And that's how it shows 6 o'clock. Here we've got the number representing the hour. That's a 10. Find 10 on the clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Make the shorthand pointing to the 10. Here we've got the minutes, 00. We know that means straight up. Make the long hand pointing to the 12. That represents 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Last one. This shows the hour. Find that number on the clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Draw our short green hand pointing towards that 7. 00 represents the minutes. That means straight up to the 12 to show 0 minutes. Our clock says 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. That's drawing hands to show clocks by the hour. All right, it's the time in our show when we have a segment I like to call Questionable Letters. And that's where a viewer writes in to ask us something. Let's see what today's letter is going to ask.
Questionable letters.
Was that? We've got a letter coming in from a fan. Pass me the letter. Here we go.
It says, to Mr. C, the teacher, Mr. C, what makes a clock tick? From Anita, more time.
Well, Anita, what makes a clock tick is the inside parts of the clock. And there's two kinds of clocks. There's electronic clocks and mechanical clocks. And the mechanical clocks use weights and gears, and as those gears turn, we hear that ticking sound.
Uh-huh. All right, you're just making that sound with your voice.
Thanks for your letter, Anita.
More worksheet lessons.
So here we have a worksheet on telling time. In fact, this one is telling time to the half hour. And in this case, they show us what time the clock should say. 4:30, 6:30. The hour is 1 and the minutes are 30, so 1:30. But we need to draw the hands that are missing. Let's take a look at this first one for 4:30. We know on our Judy clock that with the minute hand pointing straight up and the hour hand pointing straight at the 4, that tells me 4 o'clock. But if I want to bring the minute hand around, halfway around the clock, down here to the 30-minute mark, then as I turn the minute hand, my hour hand also moves. Look at that red hand. It's starting to move between the 4 and the 5. So that when I get down here, it's actually now halfway between 4 and 5. This clock tells us 4:30. So let's look at this hands very carefully. Small hour hand is in the middle between 4 and 5. Minute hand, the long minute hand, straight down towards the 6 because that's where our 30-minute mark is. So let's draw 4:30. Well, I know I need my long hand pointing down to the 6. That's going to show me 30. And I know I need to have my short hand pointing between the 4 and the 5. So I'm going to make my short hand pointing between the 4 and the 5. Notice I made some little dotted lines just to help me out. Let's take a look at the next one. 6:30. My minute hand, long minute hand, is going to point straight down to the 6 because that represents 30 minutes. Doesn't represent 6, it represents 30 minutes. 6:30 means halfway past the 6, halfway past the 6 on its way to the 7, so halfway between the 6 and the 7 is where I want my short hour hand to point. I draw a little dotted line just to help me line it up. Here we go with 1:30. 30 minutes is the long minute hand pointing down to the 6, right? Because remember, we've got 0 up here, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Oh, there's 5 minutes between each number, 30. So I know my long minute hand has to point down to the 6 to represent 30 minutes. But my short hand has to be halfway between the 1 and the next number. So 1 and 2, 2 is the next number. My short hour hand has to point between those two numbers. Like that. 1:30. Here we have 10:30. Where should my minute hand point to? It should point down to my 6 to represent 30 minutes. What two numbers should my hour hand point between? It should point between the 10 and the 11, halfway between the 10 and the 11 to show that it's 10:30. The next one. Hour is 9, minutes are 30. Where do I draw my long red hand pointing to for 30 minutes? Straight down to the 6. That represents the 30 minutes. Doesn't represent 6. It represents the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the way up 28, 29, 30. 30 minutes. And my hour hand needs to be between what two numbers? Between the 9 that it's already halfway past and the 10 that it has not yet reached. So I'm going to draw my shorter hour hand pointing halfway between the 9 and the 10 to show that it's 9:30. It's halfway there to 10, not quite yet. 12:30. A minute hand has to point to 6 for 30 minutes. And the hour hand needs to point between two numbers. Now it's not 12 anymore. It's halfway between the 12 and the 1. So I want to make my hour hand halfway between that 12 and the 1. Remember, it's a shorter hand. So I'm not going to draw it all the way up there. There we go. 12:30. And that's telling time to the half hour.
Oh, so I guess we're all out of time? Out of time, get out of time.
Yeah.
Well, I sure had fun, but it's probably like when you have fun, like time just flies. Time flies. Get it? Time flies.
Uh-huh.
Time to go.
Yeah, okay. I gotta go.
So wait, hang on. Where are you going? I mean, if time's up, where are you going to, man? Can you take me with you?
Yeah, I'm off to go stand in front of a great big clock in silhouette and sort of pose and have some nice background music playing. All right, see you later, clock.
Oh well, okay then. I guess maybe next time. Next time you'll take me with you. I never get to go anywhere. I'm always just sort of stuck here in time. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me, and I hope you learned something new and had fun doing the lessons. Join me next time on another episode of Lessons from the Classroom.